Well, Andrew Wilson got on the Joe Rogan Experience. I was like, holy shit. Congratulations to Andrew Wilson. That's pretty awesome. I think he absolutely deserves it. But that's how popular streaming is right now. Is that one of the most super chatted streamers in the world um, is currently or was on the Joe Rogan Experience, which is I think a big deal for all streamers. Next up, I bet is Nick Fuentes. I think the Joe Rogan's game plan. I don't think Andrew Wilson knows this. This is just my theory that Joe Rogan's got a long-term plan to bring Andrew Wilson on. I mean, not Andrew Wilson, excuse me, Nick Fuentes on. But in order to have Nick Fuentes on, he has to soften the blow a little bit. So he brings on somebody like Nick Fuentes adjacent, someone on the right. Uh, I don't know if Andrew Wilson's like a political talking head. I see Andrew Wilson more as a debater slash entertainer. I appreciate what Andrew Wilson's skills are. He's absolutely a skilled entertainer, and he's putting a spotlight on the whole YouTube street. Like he's a YouTube streamer, and he got on Joe Rogan. I don't know. There's been plenty of YouTube content creators that have gone on Joe Rogan, but most of their stuff I feel like was long form content, like videos and whatever, what have you. I don't know how many other streamers, quote unquote, have been on Joe Rogan. And, I listened to about half of the Andrew Wilson uh, podcast with Joe Rogan. And I think podcasting is dying 100%. I think, there's only so many topics out there in the world, right? And when podcasting was first coming out and it was like in its infancy and its adolescence and its young adulthood, everything was fresh, right? So Joe Rogan was interesting when he brought on Bert Kreischer the first time. People were like, wow, Bert Kreischer, Joe Rogan. Now if Bert Kreischer goes on Joe Rogan, people are like, holy shit, not again. If Tom Segura goes on Joe Rogan, people are like, oh my gosh, I've heard this. So even Joe Rogan's in a bit of a podcasting pickle where, he's running out of people. That's just the truth. He's running out of people to bring on the show. And most podcasts are like this. There's just everyone's talked to everyone. Comedians have been on each other's podcasts 10 times already. Scientists, researchers have been on the shows. CIA agents have been on the shows. How many times are you going to bring on the same CIA agent? How many times are you going to have Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock on to tell you the same thing you've already heard? They might share one story where you're like, oh, I didn't know that. But everything else you guys talked about, I was familiar with. So I think I think the bubbles maybe popped. But now, Joe Rogan's looking at the landscape, and who does he bring on? Who hasn't he talked to? Well, he hasn't really talked to a lot of streamers. He's going to bring on more live streamers, right? He's going to bring on more live streamers. Live streamers I think it is definitely going to replace podcasting, and it already has replaced podcasting in a lot of ways. People want things now. They want it live. They want it fresh. They want that fresh content. Podcasting used to be live for Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan used to do live podcasting, and then he went to pre-recorded, which is, a choice. But the difference between a live show and a pre-recorded show, there is an absolute difference. There's something to a live show, like, they might say something they shouldn't say. It's risky. It's a risky business. I'm waiting for Jay Dyer to get on JRE. Would be pretty entertaining with the topics they discuss. Yeah, Jay Dyer, nothing against Andrew Wilson. I think Jay Dyer would be more interesting in a lot of ways because he has interests that align with Joe Rogan. Jay Dyer's, he's not a conspiracy theorist, but he's absolutely, I don't know, maybe is Jay Dyer a conspiracy theorist? He knows enough about conspiracy theories and the occult that I think Joe Rogan would really enjoy having a conversation with him. They talk about a lot of things that I'm interested in, the occult, the New World Agenda. I think topic-wise, that would be a much more entertaining conversation. Definitely a sign of the end of Joe Rogan. That was a mediocre interview. Yeah, yeah, an interview would put it lightly. It's been over for a while. Koof Era Joe was at its highest in views, I believe, but now it's going down. Everybody's views were the highest during the pandemic, by the way. You look at people's, a lot of content creators, a lot of their, if you sort by popular or the things they made, almost everything was the most popular during the pandemic. It was what a time to be a content creator, and I absolutely missed most of it. That would have been, I should have taken advantage. And his interviewing skills have decreased over the last few years. People's, a lot of content creators, a lot of their, if you sort by popular or the things they made, almost everything was the most popular during the pandemic. It was what a time to be a content creator, and I absolutely missed most of it. That would have been, I should have taken advantage. And his interviewing skills have decreased over the last few years. Interesting take. Totally agree. Although I never really got into Joe Rogan's interviews that much anyway. It was a lot of new age BS. Tons of that. I agree. Jay would have been a little more interesting for that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like occult. Whether, I just find it interesting. Jay Dyer is a wealth of information. And Andrew Wilson, his skill set is in debating. And challenging other people's views. And him and Joe Rogan, I haven't listened to the whole thing, but I don't think they were there to debate each other. But I'll have to listen to the rest of it. But I'm happy for Andrew Wilson. Whether you like Andrew Wilson or not, if you're a streamer, it's a good sign. I suppose that another streamer has broken through to the top. And he did it in a short period of time. I remember, I feel like I was there in the infancy of his Crucible career. I don't know where I subscribed, but I remember him only having a couple hundred viewers. I feel like I remember him being at 100 to 200 viewers and watching him. And to see his rise, it's a good, some people think it's suspicious, but I think he worked hard. He figured it out, and he did a fantastic job in creating a YouTube career, and he made a good blueprint for other content creators and how to be successful. I think there's a lot of good things you could say about Andrew Wilson, and of course you could critique him. People have made entire YouTube. they've etched themselves in their YouTube corners of being Andrew Wilson criticizers, trying to pick up the scraps by mentioning his name, which is a tried and true YouTube path. Is talk shit on other people, get their attention. But what's next? But in general, when I think about podcasting, I think. It's like comedy. Comedy, people say, is dying. The comedy bubble has also popped. I think comedy is a lot like rap music, which I don't really listen to anymore. Most rappers, eventually a good rapper might, or a good hip hop artist might talk about their life and the struggles of it, and then eventually it becomes their music becomes a reflection of the life of success, and it's not relatable anymore. I think this is maybe true for a lot of musical talents. When they first come out, there's a lot of heart and soul in their music, and then they get money, and they don't become relatable. And I think that's what happened to a lot of comedians. Some examples people point to is like Tom Segura. Tom Segura used to be a relatable comedian. And then when you get enough cars, a big enough house, lots of watches, and you're taking private jets or first class all the time, you lose the funny. Losing the funny is the worst thing that can happen to a comedian, but you lose the relatability, right? You no longer see your audience and yourself as like as like one thing. You start to see distinctions. Like when comedians first start, there's not a lot of difference between the comedian on stage and the person sitting in the crowd. In fact, the person sitting in the crowd might be, in some sense, more successful than the comedian on stage. But the relatability needs to be there. And I've been thinking about my own relatability to my audience, and like I was trying to think of stories I can tell about my life. But like, what's relatable, dude? I was like, I'm trying to think of stories of how to, how do I tell a story about me doing dishes, or me vacuuming, or me doing laundry? And I'm doing all these things. I'm like, there is no story when it comes to doing laundry. There is no story I can tell when I'm doing dishes. This is just, it's relatable. It's certainly relatable to most people, but there's nothing interesting there. It's a short story. Doing laundry is a short story. How do you make a story out of doing laundry? I can't. I don't know how. That's how most of my life is. How do I make... All of my life is just like little short stories that are 100% relatable, but they're boring. There's nothing interesting about it. So I've been trying to think of things in my life that are relatable, that are worth telling about, and they're somewhat interesting. And I'm struggling with that. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. I heard Andrew suggested Dyer to Joe. I think Jay might get on Jerry before this year ends. That'd be cool. Jay Dyer would be, like I said, he'd be great to have on. I think, there's, like I was saying, even though podcasting is dead, there are still a swath of people Joe Rogan could have interesting conversations with. There's plenty of people. But, though he's interviewed so many people, like now there's less pull with some people. And I think it goes with the cycles too. Like when the next election cycle comes up and he has the next potential president-elect on his podcast, that'll be a big deal, right? I don't know who. Maybe it'll be J.D. Vance, and he'll have Gavin Newsom on, and he'll have I don't know who else might run, but he'll have those people on. And things going. There's seasons to things. But who? Yeah, you. I'm not. Andrew Wilson, I think, is definitely a turning point for podcasting, at least for Joe Rogan. It's a sign of the times. Streamers are more influential than ever. And the weird thing is, some of the most influential streamers are on TikTok, which is baffling to me. And Andrew Wilson, I think, is quite aware of it, right? I'm not, I don't know. I think he's aware of it too, but the real streaming platform isn't YouTube, it's TikTok, right? You really want a large audience, you stream on TikTok. You really want a young audience, you stream on TikTok. If you want millennials and Gen Xers and boomers, you stream on YouTube. I really don't believe YouTube's the place. Like, if you want to be a successful streamer, dude, looking at myself now, I'm like, why don't I stream on TikTok? I should be a TikTok streamer. But aesthetically, I hate the vertical view. And the community of TikTok, I think it's a whole different bag of apples, or whatever the hell people say. But it's definitely the future. I think Andrew Wilson sees it. I see it. He's actually has the initiative to do it.